Well, all right, ready?
Yep.
Game face.
Ready.
When John's done talking.
Interrupting.
Yeah.
Not
Is
true.
he good?
This is GRL Raw, the podcast where the GRL team tells you why they're different. Who the hell are they? Why should you want them fighting for you? The industry leader in law with over 180 years of combined experience. This team is here to shed light on crucial topics in law to keep you aware and informed, because it comes back to the primary point. We give a damn.
Well, welcome to Season 2, Episode
9.
9. Episode 9. We don't have a title for it yet, but we are going to talk about everything related to trash, trespass, and telephones.
Yep.
The triple T's.
The triple T's.
Triple T's. And you found, Ms. Donut, the single best current event that we could do to lead into this topic.
Yeah, if the crimes alleged weren't so terrible, this might be our guy. He's hitting several of the legal issues that we've talked about quite often on this podcast and behind the scenes.
All of them. I mean, we probably should have saved this one for the last episode because it brings the year full circle.
It does.
And there's trash.
There's trash.
There's phones.
There's phones.
There's trespass. Probably somewhere.
They did a trash trip at the house.
See, there we go. So we got trespassing, and we have cell phone data, which we talked about at the very beginning with the Moscow murders. So
Yep.
What's the current event? What are we talking about?
We're talking about Rex Heuermann, which is the suspected Long Island serial killer.
I had no idea this even existed. This is what I get for not watching the news or paying attention to stuff, but this is actually fascinating stuff.
It is, and I didn't know it was a thing until he was arrested in the summer 2023 summer. But it's always fascinating when something like this happens 15 years later, and how they tracked down a suspected killer.
So give us an overview of the case.
Okay. So Rex has been indicted for 3 murders right now, and he's the prime suspect in a 4th murder. So essentially, he's alleged to have committed these murders in 2009 and 2010. I think it was around 2010, Long Island law enforcement ended up finding essentially a grave
Okay.
of, I think it was 11 bodies total. And they have linked 4 of them together that they call I think Long Island 4, or their
Is it Gilgo or
Gilgo 4? Yep. Gilgo 4. And they've been referring to these 4 victims as a group due to the relationship that they appear to have to one another.
Okay.
Which is the similarities between these victims' bodies and the investigations so far that they've connected is they're all women between the age of 22 to 27, sex workers. They all had missing clothing and missing personal items. All of them had recent contact with a burner phone. And all of the deaths were by homicide. And 2 of the 4 victims' phones were used after they were killed.
Oh, okay. And so they've arrested Rex Heuermann, charged him with 3 or 4 counts of...
3 counts so far, but he's the prime suspect in the 4th.
And there's like a total of 11 bodies that I'm sure they'll keep working on. Okay. So what does this have to do? What's the juicy details that flow into what we're going to talk about today?
So it's how they arrested him or came to know of Rex Heuermann and his alleged criminal behaviors.
Murders.
Yeah.
All right, break it down. Break it down.
These cases had since they found the bodies, they've been cold. And
Sorry.
yeah, I know.
Okay. Dad joke.
The cases have been cold, but in January of 2022, they created a task force of several different law enforcement agencies, and they decided to re-go through all of the evidence that they'd collected from all of the disappearance of these women and everything that they have found from the bodies and whatnot. Interestingly, within 2 months, his name came up for the first time ever once they had this task force. And it was due to a connection to a first-generation Chevy Avalanche. And I don't remember the exact details, but there was something about like the back of the car that was different, or it had some sort of add-on or whatever. Mm-hmm. And some witness to one of the disappearances had told law enforcement 12 years ago that this Chevy Avalanche was who he suspected the victim had left with the last time. So they figure out there's this first generation Chevy Avalanche that was registered to him at the time of the murders, and that is how they initiated the investigation.
So that's how they had that initial connection and then started piecing it together from there.
So they knew that all of these victims had communications with a burner phone right before they died.
What's a burner phone?
A burner phone is a phone that is set up to be an anonymous phone, to not link back to the individual that's using it, essentially. And so they ended up making connections between Rex and these burner phones that the victims had communications with. And he is alleged to have called taunting family members over the years.
That doesn't ever help you get away with anything.
It is so creepy.
Yeah.
So creepy.
Well, when you get into the details of this case, it's creepy as hell.
Yeah. So one of the victims specifically, he has taunted the sister, including after he allegedly killed her, took her phone, was calling the sister, told the sister that he had killed her sister, made several different phone calls within like a week of her murder, and continued to taunt her over the years. Yeah.
Wow.
But so the connections that they made between the burner phones and his phone are really interesting to me, because we've talked about in the Moscow murder the cell tower problems, especially in Moscow, Idaho. One thing we talked about was there's only 2 local cell towers.
Right.
So how indicative is it really that his phone is pinging?
And it kind of, I mean, when we were reading through the complaint, there was a lot of in the general areas, even in this case, in the area, New York, Long Island, I'm guessing there's a ton of people, a lot of activity. So in the area, I'm sitting there rolling my eyes. Ooh, good one.
Yeah, I think that one of the things that separates this case from the Moscow case, though, is that they were able to track both his cellular device and the burner's device. Mm-hmm. He works in Manhattan and he lived in Long Island. So they were able to show slightly in the criminal complaint that when one phone moved, so did the other.
Oops.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about burner phones in depth with Dope Yoda here in a bit, but so that's not helpful for him. What about, we have our favorite topic in this case.
Yeah, we do.
Trash rips.
Trash rips.
Do tell.
So, they did have DNA on these bodies, so of course he's been a suspect since they identified him with the Chevy, and then they did all of the interweb investigation.
Here's one thing I will say. They did a very good job of, law enforcement in general could take a note from these guys, because and gals, there's always that guy. Law enforcement did a really good job in this case of actually going and getting records from cell phone providers, from web providers, from businesses, from credit card companies, put it together a case before they even started down these other avenues, which is incredibly important and helpful in these cases.
And they are able to, with all of the investigation that they did, they are able to actually make real connections between this burner phone, the burner email, and like the information he's using on the burner phone directly to him.
Tinder profiles.
Andy Roberts. That'll get you.
Tinder will get you.
So, yeah, some of the interesting things, they had records of the wife's flights.
Yep.
And she was out of town for 3 of the disappearances.
So old boy's married.
He is married.
When wife's away.
Yep.
Okay.
And they got all of his personal, not burner phone records. His cell phone was always at home during the murders.
Oh.
Which is interesting, too.
Okay.
He tried, allegedly.
Allegedly.
But the trash rip. So there was a female hair on all of the victims, 3 of the victims.
Female hair?
Female hair that did not belong to the victims. They did a trash rip in July 21, 2022 at Rex Heuermann's house. And they were able to connect the female hairs to Rex's wife. Oh, yeah. Which is interesting altogether. There's no allegations that she had any knowledge or that she was involved, but goes to show that your DNA can show up at a crime scene.
Well, that's going to be traced. That's transfer evidence is what that would be.
Yep.
Okay.
But March of 2023, they had him surveilled at this point. They've been watching him for a year, and he walks out of his Manhattan office with a box of pizza and throws it away in a public trash can and continues to walk. FBI agents run over, grab it out of the trash, and they were able to compare the DNA, some DNA that was found on victims and the DNA that they found on this pizza crust to connect him.
Do these alleged murderers not watch CSI?
He does.
Boy, not very well.
Well, that's true, but he's also allegedly hasn't committed a murder since 2010.
I mean,
he did a pretty good job.
No.
You don't think so?
No.
Well, I mean, once it starts to unravel, it starts to unravel, but his name wasn't talked about by law enforcement.
Lesson number 1, eat your crust, kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
Throw it away in your office, idiot.
So dumb. Well, and we'll get into that with Dope Yoda about public trash versus private trash. There's a difference. Yep. And then when you're discarding something like that, we actually Iowa Supreme Court last year, I want to say, had a big case came down on discarded materials with DNA. Yeah. That case was a straw.
Yep.
And in Iowa, you throw it away, CSI gets to get it. And
it's certainly busy street in New York. You just throw away a pizza box. If they want it, that's going to be obvious.
Yeah. Okay.
It is also interesting too. They did do the trash rip at his residence, but I don't think that they got her DNA.
Right. Not his.
So
this is gonna be an interesting one to follow.
Yeah.
The great thing about it is it absolutely sets up what we're going to talk about next.
Oh, yeah. Fantastic.
With the Dope Yoda.
Yep.
Because we're going to get an update on trash rips.
Yep.
We're going to talk about the concept of trespass.
Yep.
And then he's going to drop the Dope Yoda knowledge about burner phones.
I'm excited.
And we're not going to promote burner phones, but they do have a legitimate use.
They do.
And a legitimate privacy protection that he's going to be able to explain to us here in a hot second.
And there's some fatal faults that people think that they're being sly about, and not so much.
The Burner Blunders.
The Burner Blunders. All right.
All right. Well, does that tell us what we need to know about the Heuermann and set up perfectly? We're teed up.
It does.
For the Dope Yoda.
It does.
All right.
We might have to follow this guy because it is an interesting legal case, but he's probably going to go to prison, I'm going to guess.
Well, we'll see. We have 2 to follow the whole time. We have Moscow, which involve phones, cell towers, trash. There's trash. See?
This is how it's getting done.
We're not saying that people could learn something from this podcast, but we're saying people could learn something from this podcast.
Good.
All right, we'll be right back with Dope Yoda dropping knowledge on the 3 T's.
Hey,
welcome,
good
Mr.
morning.
Murphy. Dope Yoda.
Good to be back.
Donut just set us up perfectly for what we're about to talk to with our current event. We talked about the Rex Heuermann case.
That's right.
Are you familiar with it?
I am.
Fascinating. I had no idea. But we're going to talk about the 3 T's.
Trash,
Trash,
trespass,
trespass.
telephones.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Yes, sir. So let's get started right off the bat. You are fresh off of arguing with the Iowa Supreme Court. Not arguing to, but probably with the Iowa Supreme Court at the Iowa Supreme Court.
Last week, court on the road in Waverly at Waverly Shell Rock High School.
Okay. And what was the issues?
So this is the follow-up to State versus Wright, the case we argued in 2021.
Trash pulls.
Trash pulls. And so, if we revisit that case real quickly, police were pulling people's garbage. They've been doing it for 40 years. At night, cover of darkness, discovering information in garbage that they would then use to apply for a search warrant, use the search warrant to then go into the person's house. And so in Wright, we got the court to recognize the concept of trespass. So when law enforcement makes physical contact with somebody's effect, somebody's personal property,
Garbage can.
garbage bag, garbage itself, the contents, papers, anything like that, when they lay their hands on that, look at it, for purposes of discovering information in a criminal case, that's a trespass. And so it's essentially a search without a warrant.
Violates the 4th Amendment and
And
Article 1, Section 8 of the Iowa Constitution.
That's right. And so we had that argument in Wright, won that case. And so that established, it had been around for a long time. It just hadn't been raised. People were looking at these cases from an expectation of privacy standpoint. And so we get the court to we reinvigorate that idea about trespass. And so Wright, that was a 4-3 decision. Still hotly contested.
Yeah.
You can see in court opinions that they are looking for the opportunity to overturn that.
Some of them are.
Some of them are. And so, they'll probably get the opportunity to revisit garbage because after trespass, after Wright, the legislature codified Iowa Code Section 808.16.
They didn't like the decision. They made a new law.
They made a new law. And so the new law, interestingly, says that you don't have an expectation of privacy in garbage, that household garbage set out by the curb is abandoned property, and there's no trespass when law enforcement takes that, and all sorts of stuff. And so they essentially passed a law that declared what the Supreme Court says unconstitutional. They said it's now lawful.
Which is backwards. If you lost first day of law school, Constitution is first. After that is written law.
It is backwards. And so we think that is a great separation of powers question. It's eventually going to make its way back to the Supreme Court. We have had a district court ruling in our favor on that struck down a search under that code section. That was not appealed by the county attorney's office in that case.
So let's talk about the trespass issue. So the trespass issue builds on what you just argued. Builds on the Wright decision.
Correct. Yeah. Right is the foundation.
And now we're moving up from that.
So now, fast forward to the argument in Waverly last week. So we took trespass and we applied it to canine sniffs. So when law enforcement runs a dog around a car, normally when the dog alerts to the odor of contraband, coming from inside the car, that gives the officers probable cause to get in the car. It's not a search. Okay. So it doesn't implicate 4th Amendment.
Because the dog is just running around the car, sniffing the air that's available to be sniffed.
Correct. It's free air sniff.
Yep.
It's going around the perimeter. No problem with that.
Okay.
But what we're seeing in many traffic stops, and this could be from the officer or in this particular case, the officer and the canine, is law enforcement are now making physical contact with the outside of the car, and they're doing things like leaning into the window because they're trying to detect maybe the odor of marijuana.
Yep.
And in this case, they ran the dog around the car. They needed the dog to sniff an area that was above the ground. So if the dog's paws were on the pavement, they couldn't reach this area unless the dog physically put its paws on the truck in order to sniff this area.
So the dog, in this particular case, the dog laid paws on the vehicle
Yes.
in order to sniff a different area.
Yes. And it was at the direction of the handler who we believed also touched the car.
Okay.
So the handler's touching the vehicle, directing the dog to put its paws up on the vehicle in order to sniff this. And that's exactly what happened in this case. Officer directed the dog onto the truck, sniffed this elevated area, and then immediately sat down. That's the alert that gives the officer then probable cause to enter the vehicle without a warrant.
Okay. And
so very interesting questions. And
it was all over the place.
Back and forth. It was all over the place. There were other issues in that case besides trespass that kind of add to it. But this came from the Court of Appeals, and so we did not get the opportunity to argue at the Court of Appeals. And, and I'll be honest, they did not get this correct.
They missed.
They missed it.
Yep.
And when, I'm not too surprised because when the Court of Appeals had the opportunity to address it in right, they missed it as well.
Right.
And so it took the Supreme Court to correct that. We think the Supreme Court is going to have to correct what the Court of Appeals did in Arietta.
So trespass is being furthered.
Yes.
The argument of a trespass is being furthered to where, it's one thing to touch, to grab, to take people's property. Now what's happening is it's being applied in areas where law enforcement intrudes upon certain areas or uses and touches to get a better view or to get more information.
That's correct. And it's not a new concept. There are other cases that don't call it trespass, but when law enforcement might move an item in order to view a serial number or something like that.
Yeah, that's very clear. That's a search.
They're searching it. And so it really, you could tell the court was a little bothered by the idea that, hey, we've opened up this trespass argument and now it can apply to any personal property. So it's not just limited to garbage. And that's the pushback that we've had in other cases where we apply right. They're saying, well, this just applies to garbage. No, it's pretty clear. We're talking about constitutionally protected areas, so persons, houses, papers, and effects, vehicles in effect, garbage cans are in effect, any personal property is in effect. And so if we prevail in this, then law enforcement would not be able to make contact with personal property belonging to people.
For the purposes of obtaining evidence. It's
Yes.
one thing to put like what they do. They walk up on a vehicle, they put their hand on the taillight.
Leave a palm print.
Leave a palm print. There's a reason for that.
Yes.
That you see it on the videos all the time. They give it a butt slap as they're walking up. That's not to find evidence.
Correct.
That's for other reasons. So that would still be okay.
And same thing if you walk the dog around the car and the dog happened to brush by the car on the way the tail hits it. That's not a trespass.
You're not intentionally touching private property in order to obtain evidence.
Correct.
That's the big line.
And you can tell that the court was a little bothered by that concept. Where do we draw the line? I think in a situation where,
Purpose.
And this is why the facts were really good in our favor. You have the handler pointing out areas on the vehicle for the dog to sniff. The dog is touching the vehicle in response to that command, and then alerting. And so we've got the trespass.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We'll see how that one turns out. I'm predicting 8 separate opinions. We have 7 justices. Somebody's going to write twice because it's going to be that much all over the place.
It could be a big opinion, and there were other issues that are, I think, in our favor as well on that could generate some additional case law in Iowa that's already clearly established, but applied to this case, could provide a basis to reverse the Court of Appeals, provide some justice for our client.
Perfect. And so that leads us to the third T. Telephones.
Privacy.
What are we going to talk about? Let's tee this one up.
So, when we started talking about this podcast, it reminded me of a blog for for the website that was started in late October of 2020. It was before the election.
Yep.
And it was going to be about burner phones because if you remember, there was some information being leaked out that there was an email thread about Hunter Biden and his business partner, Devin Archer, doing business in Ukraine. And one of the last entries in that thread was a suggestion by Hunter Biden to Devin Archer to go to a 7-Eleven or a CVS and buy a cell phone, and I'll do the same. And so in 2020, that is late 2020, that's being characterized by 50 current and former intel chiefs and spooks as Russian disinformation. And, you know, and as time has evolved, we know that that's not the case. But, you know, what Hunter is referring to, obviously, is a burner phone.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they want to take their business interests, whatever they are, and they want to take those offline so that only they can communicate. And those communications retain some anonymity because these are prepaid phones with prepaid SIM cards, things that don't involve long-term, you know, contracts with cell phone companies that would reveal your identity because you have to show ID and everything else that goes with that.
They're used burner phones.
Burner phones.
The point of it is they wanted to maintain their privacy
Yes.
of their communications and to keep outside eyes and ears from infringing on that privacy
Correct.
for whatever reason.
For whatever reason.
Doesn't mean it's illegal.
Yeah, and these burner phones, like, okay, so obviously,
Yep. No, go ahead.
you know, media and film have done a very good job of convincing the public that the purpose for these burner phones, you know, is to conduct illegal activity.
Right.
So if you think back to The Wire, you know, the HBO series.
Oh, yeah.
So Stringer Bell and his crew, you know, you can remember the scene where they're pulling everybody's beepers and telling them don't use the payphones by the towers anymore. And they start handing these very dumb phone, flat Nokia phones, you know, no flat cover, no apps. It's just phone and text.
Yeah.
And they're instructing them that here are the 3 numbers, you know, that you're going to, this one's for the re-up, here's the number for the muscle, here's the number to call me. So they're memorize these numbers, you know, don't use the phone for any other purpose. That's the purpose of the burner phone.
So the reason for that is the information that is on our phones, our personal phones.
Yes.
And so our phones are our lifeline these days, right? It's our calendars, it's our communications,
Contacts,
photos,
email.
family, email. What are some things that a normal personal phone may be sharing with, let's just say, private social media, right? Meta, because those sons of bitches listen, and they know whether they're listening or they're coordinating information and your use of various products. They're using it back and forth for marketing purposes, for business purposes, and it's all based upon what you agree by downloading the app.
The permissions that you give for the phone. So if you think about it, your microphone, your camera, your contact list, all of that stuff, you're giving permission, probably unknowingly in most instances, you're giving permission for these companies to gather information about you. Now, the reason for them doing that is they're going to then take that information, figure out patterns, and then market things to you, sell that information to other companies so that they can market to you.
Make money off of their knowledge of what you're doing, what you're interested in.
Correct.
These marketing companies, I tell you.
And predictive in a sense too. So you can see where artificial intelligence comes into play, where it can then analyze all of that data that's being scraped from every time that you connect to a cell tower, every time that you go online and purchase something, that information is being analyzed for business purposes.
One thing I noticed is a connection between Netflix and Meta, or Netflix and, well, Instagram is now Meta, right? They're part of that conglomerate. It's not a monopoly. But if I watch something on Netflix, I log in, I'm with my Gmail account, okay? So that's Gmail, that's Google.
Right.
And I watch something on Netflix, and then I open social media, whether it's Instagram Reels, whether it's Instagram, whether it's Facebook, whatever it is, I start getting fed content, especially in Reels. I get fed content based upon what I just watched on Netflix.
how many times are you talking about what we're going to have for dinner, and then you go onto your phone and recipes start showing?
Yeah, it's there. And watch, we're gonna get now that my phone's out, we're gonna get scrolled some interesting content. If it serves some interesting content, and that's private. Those are private businesses utilizing what we unknowingly agree to make money off of our dumbasses.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so there would be reasons, and there are things that you can do to prevent that from happening. And one of those things is to use a burner phone or to use a burner number.
That's the easiest way.
That is easiest.
The other thing is, okay, so what information can the government obtain based upon what we do with our phones? So before we even get to the burner phones and the purpose and function of that, what's information that can be obtained from our phone usage by the government for, let's say, for example, for criminal investigations?
So we know that law enforcement can get phone records that might indicate length of the call,
Okay.
where the call was placed, who the recipient was, and then they could use that data based on where the call was made to maybe coordinate a location between cell phone towers. And so if they're trying to place somebody at a certain location, they may be able to use available data to do that.
And that's just the phone communication. So what they call call detail records.
Right.
We'll give, based upon your phone records, we'll give out to law enforcement who you called, when you called, how long that call was. They can do the same for text messages, even if they're not on your phone, who you texted, when you texted, and frequency of that.
That's right.
But then if they get your actual phone, they can get things like your physical location. So Google, so I'm one of the dinosaurs still that uses an Android device.
Me too.
Good.
Yeah.
I prefer it that way. I don't like Apple for a lot of reasons. But even Apple, if you have your location activated, if you use maps, if you use directions, if you use GPS at all, you have to have what? Or even weather reports. You have to have your location activated on your phone. When you have your location activated on your phone, that's linked to your Google account or to your iCloud account.
Right.
And it tracks your location where your phone is the entire time. A lot of people don't realize that Big Brother is watching where you're going.
If you pay attention, you'll get notifications. At least I would get them through Google. It would show how long I've been in my car that month, where the most popular places I went, my routes every day. They'll have it mapped out, and that information, I'm unknowingly allowing them to gather that.
And if they get a search warrant for your phone, they can pull that information directly from your phone.
Every day where I was.
Mm-hmm. The other thing they can get is most people nowadays are searching browser history is on your phone, and it's tied to a Google account or a iCloud account, and they can pull up, as we saw in the Heuermann case, they can pull up person's search history. They can find out the exact phrases you type in, and with the Heuermann search history, there's some naughty shit that he was looking for. It can sink you. And
that's right.
I mean, think about it this way also. We're looking at it from a context of criminal. Think about in like a family law case, a divorce, a dissolution. The information that the other side could get obtained just based upon what people are doing on their phones. Yeah. You want some salacious stuff right there.
Yeah, and people aren't thinking about all the different ways that data and information is captured, unknowingly, and it's there, it's preserved for anyone who's got subpoena power or warrant. So it's.
And sometimes it can save your butt. I mean, because it also can say, like, for example, when a photo's taken, the location, the time, the exact second of the day that the photo's taken, all of that stuff is registered in somebody's normally registered phone, and it's all obtainable whether by consent or by way of a search warrant. The government can end up getting it if they got probable cause to get into people's phone.
True.
That's crazy.
I mean, it's something that, and if you're looking to cover your tracks with something like that, the smartphone just has so many ways to reveal things about, that could be incriminating that, maybe it's a better idea to do your business on something that's a little more dumbed down.
Dumb phones.
Yeah, dumb phones.
Burner phones.
Burner phones.
What if you had to give a definition of a burner phone, that phrase burner phone, what would it be?
It'd be a very simple device. It's prepaid for the most part. So the phone's prepaid. The SIM card that's used to power the communications and the text, that is also prepaid. So it's something that you don't have any long-term contracts for. You can buy these devices, 7-Eleven, any type of tienda, bodega, any place where prepaid phones are available.
So when you get a phone of this nature, go to 7-Eleven, I buy a phone. In order to use that phone, do I have to create an account?
Yeah, so my understanding of the way that you would set up that phone is you'd buy the phone and you'd buy the SIM card. If you're going to do it right, you're going to pay in cash.
Right.
The people that are really interested in privacy might even have somebody else make that purchase for them. Or if they were going to go into a place, because most of these places have surveillance cameras and things like that, maybe this would be a good time to wear a COVID mask. Use it. Yeah, use it to kind of hide your identity a little bit. Because you are going to be captured making that purchase, and so.
But a lot of it, you create an account. In order to use something these days, you got to either link it to a social media account or link it to a registered email address or something like that. But with these, if I'm understanding you correctly, it's almost like old school telephones where you get a phone number.
You get a phone number.
And by old school, I mean the landline, the ones that plugged into the wall.
Sure.
Yeah. You get a phone number, and that's your account, is the phone number.
You'll need an email address.
You do?
Yeah, which is why you don't want to use anything personal or business related. You probably don't want to use a Gmail or a Hotmail address. You want to go to a provider that provides other layers of security, so maybe like Proton Mail. There are other providers, so it's essentially a burner email that you would only use for that purpose.
So you would still need an email.
You're going to need
You can't just say, this is my phone number, flip it open, call me on this number, and it works?
My understanding is you're going to need an email.
Huh.
And so that's why you have to kind of think this through.
Okay.
Get the email. Where you set up the email, you're probably going to need an online or a Wi-Fi connection. So you need to think, plan this out. You're going to probably go to a location that you don't usually visit with any regularity. Maybe it's not even in the town that you live in. You're going to go somewhere that has some Wi-Fi, and you're going to set up this email account.
So to have true privacy, you have to take steps backwards. You got to think backwards from the phone itself.
Correct.
Because you're going to have some type of email.
Need an email address.
Because I'm guessing you got to verify it.
Right.
So you're going to have access to this email.
Yes.
You're going to have the email created. And then to trace back, if you truly want anonymity on this, you have to think through, where am I setting up this? On what device am I setting this email up? Because if I use my personal phone to set up an email address that I want as a burner email.
That's right.
I just linked myself to that burner account.
Yeah, you've just tied that email address to your phone. So probably want to do it with a laptop in a location with public Wi-Fi where you don't usually go. Because at some point in time you may come back to that Wi-Fi. So if it's showing a pattern of your phone connecting, the burner connecting multiple times to that location, then it's gonna, then you could be maybe visually surveilled, or
cameras are everywhere now.
Cameras are everywhere. Your license plate, car driving up, and then here the phone, starts to ping the Wi-Fi at the Starbucks. So you want to use your laptop, set up that burner email, then use that email to do whatever you need to do to activate the phone.
Okay.
And that email is only going to be used for that purpose.
So that's a burner phone is in essence an attempt at a mobile anonymous telephone number.
The whole point is privacy and anonymity.
Okay. So that's what it is. This does sound, it does sound if your kid's setting up a burner phone, you're probably going to be asking them what else are they doing in life and where you failed as a parent. But so what are some legitimate lawful uses of this type of device, of this type of phone?
Yeah, when we were talking about the wire, when people think about burner phones, they think
drugs all
Walter
day.
White, Breaking Bad with 2 phones. They think Saul Goodman with a drawer full of phones, and then if you followed that through with Better Call Saul, you'll see at one point he's basically selling privacy sold here as part of his job as a manager at a retail cell phone outlet. Because he knows his clientele, he knows what they're using it for.
Right.
They want to remain private. But there are any number of reasons. I'll give you one. So
Please.
We sold an appliance that we didn't need anymore, put it on an online marketplace. The number of people so when I put that out there, they need to reach me.
Right.
Okay. The number of people that have my phone number that, forever, and they know my address, they know my name. So thinking through that, maybe I could have used a burner number for that, because once that transaction is done, people are wanting to see it, people are wanting to come over to the house.
Is it still available?
Yeah, ultimately, and that lasted for weeks after it was sold, and so.
Well, and those are a hotbed for fraud in and of themselves. People will rip people off. They set up other crimes with Facebook Marketplace posts.
And so
like Craigslist.
Thinking back, that would have been a great opportunity for a burner number, because then once
$30 to set it
once the
up.
transaction's done, then I dispose of that number, and those I'm not going to hear from those people anymore. You could have, maybe you want to separate your personal business from your or your personal life from your business, and so you might have a business number.
Okay.
And there are other ways besides a burner phone to probably accomplish that, but that way calls that are just coming in for business, right? It's somebody that you're not. It's not a friend, not a family member.
Right. When that phone rings, it's
Correct.
business.
Think about online dating. Somebody who is on an online dating site maybe doesn't want to be bothered by people who they initially, connect with, who then may want to harass them later on. So that.
Or you're the creepy bastard on a dating site with a burner phone.
See. So,
I mean.
So there's that.
Okay.
And I know.
Question 1: is this a burner phone?
Yeah. And so I think
that's a red flag. Just saying.
A side, or you've got a side hustle. You work for a company. You're trying to make some money on the side. You don't want to give your personal number or your business number where people can reach you during the day.
Not illegal.
Yeah,
right?
Not illegal, but still, it's something.
You don't want your boss to know and to be like, "Hey, Colin."
Yeah. So I think that there's a number of legitimate, purposes for that.
And most importantly, the consideration number 1 is use and maintaining your privacy is 1,000% lawful.
Yeah, until we still have a First Amendment, we still have a right to privacy.
Yeah.
And so why not use it?
Yeah. I mean, you could also talk to people in person.
Ultimately, isn't that the most private? If you can deal with somebody face to face, somebody that you can trust, where that communication is not going to go anywhere. But it's
people are lazy.
Yeah, it's difficult. It works in the movies, but in real life.
Okay, so we have the burner phones. We have legitimate uses.
Yes.
Some red flag usage. Illegal usage. We're not here to judge.
We're not.
We're here to drop knowledge.
That's right.
Can these phones be traced?
I think it's probably a misconception that despite your best efforts that it's untraceable.
Okay.
And so we believe that there are ways that law enforcement could trace you. I mean, they could certainly surveil you.
Well, if they have the number, they can. I'm assuming they can at least start getting cell phone tower data.
They could.
From the phone, because any cell phone has to connect to a tower to get transferred. That's how the technology works.
They would be able to get that.
Okay. Now, if it's a dumb phone, though, and there's no connection to the internet, that's going to provide a little bit more of a buffer, privacy buffer, wouldn't it?
So one of the things, and we'll probably talk about this a little bit later this morning, but that's not necessarily a phone that you would want to keep on. In fact, you'd probably want to remove the battery from the phone when you're not using it, because even if you've turned off GPS and any locating device or whatever service would be on that phone, you don't want it to be connecting to any tower at any point in time unless you absolutely need it.
Because that's going to then give a pattern of movement
where you are.
Even though, as we've learned, towers, you can be in Des Moines and get connected to a tower in Kansas City. I mean, there's some weird things that can happen with connections.
There are, and so it also, when you think about, well, when do I use the phone? You may not want to use it in the same place, every time. You're certainly not going to want to use it at your house, your place of business, places where you go to get your morning coffee on a regular basis. You don't want to draw any attention because, again, you're trying to preserve your identity. Right. And so if you're using it at your house, I mean, who else is going to be using a burner phone in your house?
So if we're talking about ways it can be traced, we have cell phone towers. It's going to, regardless, cell phone towers are going to be a connection that have to be made in order for you to use that phone.
Yes, and there are temporary cell phone towers that law enforcement can set up. We don't know if that...
Before we get there, though, so we have the cell tower is a way for information to be conveyed and obtained even with a burner phone.
Correct.
Right? And then if the burner phone has Wi-Fi connection or connection to the internet anywhere, anyhow, that is additional layer that can be tracked and traced, right?
Yes.
And then other than that, well, if you have an account created and used on that phone that also tracks location, that's another way to be another layer of information that could still be obtained from a burner phone.
And if you use that burner phone, if you slipped up and then reached out to social media using it, made a purchase on Amazon using it.
Now you're connected. Boom.
Now you're connected, and there might be a credit card associated with those purchases. So and that's where if that does happen, you burn the phone. You burn the number.
So, but the most private way to utilize a burner phone would simply be using no internet, no accounts of any sort.
Correct.
Other than the one that's necessary to set up the phone, and then just use telephonic and or text communication. That's it.
And use the data that your 1,000 minutes or your
that you just bought
that you purchased with
in cash
with the SIM, in cash.
Okay.
Use that data. That would be the best way to do it.
You mentioned Stingray.
Stingray.
What is Stingray?
So Stingray is a portable cell tower that law enforcement will set up. Think about maybe January 6th or a protest or some reason that law enforcement knows ahead of time there's going to be a gathering of people. They may have an interest in ultimately discovering who is at that gathering. They will set up a Stingray, which is it's essentially a pseudo cell tower. So your phone will connect with it. It will then enable the phone to pass along telephone calls and text messages and other data. But law enforcement is then capturing that, probably in real time. I don't know if they're actually seeing the text messages. I don't know if they're able to tap in on the actual conversations that are being taking place over the phone, but it enables them to surreptitiously gather that data that they can then mine to figure out who was who and where they were.
Now, is this make-believe conspiracy theory, or is this real life? This actually exists?
This does exist. I don't know of its use in Iowa, but it's been reported in other states that they've gathered information. It does raise privacy issues.
Oh, absolutely.
It raises Fourth Amendment search and seizure issues because they would not have any type of warrant ahead of time to deploy that Stingray, but it is gathering information. So your burner phone, if it's in the vicinity of the Stingray, is going to connect with it if you have it on.
So what are the other ways they could trace or blow your privacy with even utilizing a burner phone that just has, let's just say, text and a phone number?
I think if you're using it to communicate with somebody who it's on their personal phone, right? So now their phone is going to have a log of calls, text messages.
To your phone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So based on accessing their phone. So let's say that there's a confidential informant on the other side of it.
Yep. So this is the other thing is good old fashioned surveillance, backtracking, right? So do they log, if I buy a burner phone, I'm assuming there's some type of record that gets made of where that particular phone with at least a serial number is purchased from, right?
Most likely they would have to, that may require some detailed investigation, but that's why if they can figure out a day and go back and look at surveillance video to the extent it exists, you know, if you were making that purchase in person.
But thinking this through, say, for example, somebody's been investigated by law enforcement and there's a CI or law enforcement obtains the phone number that the communications are being made on, right?
Okay.
So say it's 515-226-0500. That's our office number, okay? But let's just say that's the phone number. And they see that phone number coming through because it's coming from a burner phone. You think that's fine. We'll just talk on this burner phone. That phone number, though, is going to be registered, I'm assuming, to the device.
It will be registered to the device, but they may not necessarily know because I haven't signed any long-term contract. I haven't had to show any ID to either buy the phone or the SIM card.
But just assume that they're subpoena happy.
Okay.
They get that phone number. First of all, they're going to have to know the provider of the phone number, right? The phone number itself is not going to tell them the provider.
Correct.
So if they figure out the provider of the phone, then they can send a subpoena to the provider saying, I want to know what phone that phone number is registered to. They could theoretically do that.
Theoretically do that.
And then they could send a follow-up subpoena saying, I want to know where that particular device was sold from, right?
They could probably do that. And I don't know if they're, you know, if the, let's say it's a track phone or something like that. Track phone sells thousands of them to 7-Eleven, and then 7-Eleven is going to ship those phones out to various locations. So it may not be that granular. They may not be able to figure out.
Well, let's assume that there's some business records that are going to connect the phone to the phone number and the phone identification, VIN number, whatever we want to call it. There's a, what's that called? VIN. It's not a VIN on a phone. Serial number.
Okay.
Serial number to the phone, and then they can track it to the location where it's sold at. So they go to that location where it's sold at and say, I want to know when this phone was sold and to who, with a subpoena or a search warrant. They pull it up, and now where are we at?
Yeah, so I think that if you paid with cash,
Okay.
you know, they're not going to have any record of who the purchaser was.
Because you don't have to provide identifying information to purchase the product.
In the U.S., you do not.
Okay.
There are some other countries where, in order to activate the SIM card, you have to show ID for that very
exact
reason.
reason.
Yeah,
Okay.
They want to be able to track
Okay.
who that purchaser is.
Legislation coming soon. Courtesy of Dope Yoda. This is what the third law passing.
But the reach, you know, might be it might reach a dead end where
Okay.
they can't associate the phone with an actual person.
But as in the Heuermann case, this was interesting. In the Heuermann case, they were able to track back, right? And then they actually have surveillance footage of him going into the cellular store to buy more and additional minutes for the burner phone. And then there's his mug in the surveillance buying more minutes. Not helpful.
Not helpful. So that's one of the reasons why you may not want to make the initial purchase yourself. The way that you keep adding minutes is you're going to get prepaid minute cards.
Okay.
They have to be the same card as the brand of the phone. And so you've got to think about how those are going to be purchased as well. Are you going to make those purchases? Are you going to pay somebody else to make those purchases?
So in order to truly maintain anonymity and privacy in these situations, you have to think a lot further than, I'm just going to buy a phone.
Correct.
Because you have to think back about the different ways that this information can be tracked and obtained and then utilized to undermine your privacy.
That's right. And there are some companies, there's another way that we haven't touched on yet. I mean, buying the burner phone itself and the SIM card, there are now apps that you can put on the phone.
Okay.
Third-party apps that will enable you to essentially have a burner number, and you can pick the number. So you can, if you want it from Los Angeles or El Paso or Miami, you can pick those numbers. And so the call will make it look like it's coming from that number, but it's being routed into your actual phone. So you'll never reveal the phone number that's assigned to your phone. It's a burner number. Then when it comes time to burn that number, that's exactly what the app does. And so if you initiate that burn function, the number goes, the text messages go, all the data with those transactions, photos, everything that was using that number goes. And so that may be a way to add another layer.
Okay.
Other apps that may use encryption from end to end would be like things like Signal, where you can send messages. That would be another way of doing
Another
something.
layer.
Another layer, yeah. So you can pile on these layers, and improve the anonymity, but at the end, nothing's 100%.
Well, and especially nowadays, if you're going out in public, you're not private. I mean, there's cameras everywhere. Information is flowing everywhere. It's being obtained everywhere. So if we said we're going to come up with the top 5 burner blunders. I came up with that name.
Yeah, it's good.
Thank you. Burner blunders. If we started with the biggest one, right? The biggest burner blunder, what would it be?
That would be making the initial purchase yourself and using a credit card.
Yeah,
So
it's dumb.
if the whole idea is to keep yourself, that you want to remain private, you cannot make that purchase yourself. You should have somebody else do it, or you do it in a place that's not going to have any cameras.
And that I always laugh. So when we look at the headlines on the underage gambling, right, that's been going on in NCAA, they're children. Their minds are still developing. Their brains are still developing. But these kids they create these fictitious accounts with like their mom's information allegedly.
Right.
But then they link that account to their personal PayPal account. Like, duh, like nobody's going to know where the money's going. Follow the money. That's rule number 1 to any investigation, to trying to figure out what happened, where it happened, is follow the money.
And so these purchases have to be made in cash.
Yep.
So if you're going to do it yourself, you've got to pay in cash. To re-up the minutes, that has to be done in cash.
Okay.
Prepaid cards, that's the key. Maybe if you're going to maybe do it in crypto to add another layer if you're going to do those things online. But I think that it's got to be in cash. You can't use a credit card. Anything that ties the burner to an account that can be linked to credit card or any other identifying information, it's burned at that point.
Ordering it from Amazon
Yeah.
by typing burner phone and having it delivered to your house isn't going to accomplish what you're seeking to accomplish.
Exactly. So rule number 1, either you have to do it in private, no cameras, pay somebody else, can't be done with a credit card, has to be done in cash.
Okay. Second biggest blunder.
So we've got, we've talked
kinda
about
combined
cash,
1 and 2 that we
1 and 2, credit card. Why don't we talk about using it at home or using it at work or using it as your favorite spot? The idea is you don't want any trail that's going to show that every Friday you're going to the same spot.
So a blunder would be commingling your burner use with personal use.
So any Wi-Fi at home, any Wi-Fi at the office, any public Wi-Fi, places that they can link you to, because again, if they're working backwards, they're trying to find information about this phone appearing over and over and over again with the public Wi-Fi.
So burner phone in one pocket on, with personal phone in the other pocket on, also all Wi-Fi enabled, would be a burner blunder.
It would be a burner blunder. You do not want to have, well, one, you don't want to use that public Wi-Fi in any place that could be associated with you.
Okay.
So home, work, a place that you go on a regular basis. So people that would use it would only do their burner business in
That's
locations
good, burner business, yeah.
where they don't. So you might drive out of town to some other location in order to communicate with the burner phone, because you don't want to tie it to anything that can ultimately come back to you.
So we would say we can add a third burner blunder that we didn't plan ahead. It would be keeping the burner phone on.
Yeah, so that's a big blunder,
Okay.
for sure. So if you're not using the burner, not only should it be turned off, the battery should be removed, because you don't want any ability for that phone to be picked up by some public Wi-Fi or some cell tower to give location data.
And so this is fun because we're saying remove batteries from phones.
Yes.
that's something that we used to do not growing up, but when we were coming out of law school. With now, you can't really take a battery out of a smartphone.
Much harder.
But the old school flip phones,
Yes.
back in our day, you take the battery out.
Very easy.
Very easy.
And so that's
So
the
these
reason.
burner phones are those old school Nokia flip phones.
Yeah, either the flip phone or the Nokia, but it doesn't have the screen. It might have an LED screen for just the number.
I have one at home from old times. I should have brought it so we could show the kids these days
What they look like.
what they look like.
But yeah, as long as they're active,
Okay.
and then you can get a SIM to put in that card or put the card in the phone to use. But leaving it on
Is a blunder.
is a blunder. Or there is some tech, Faraday bag cages. So you could put, if you need to leave the phone on for whatever reason, you'd put it in that bag, and that bag is supposed to provide an extra layer of protection so that wireless or Wi-Fi or other
Those are the devices. Those Faraday bags and boxes are what they use to prevent computer damage from the what are those types of attacks? The high impulse, the magnetic. Yeah. Electromagnetic.
pulse.
Yeah. I Googled that one time because we were talking about what happens if we get hit with an EMP.
And
If it's got a computer or a battery, you're screwed.
And in looking at the Faraday issue, apparently TSA does not have a problem if you've got a phone in a Faraday bag.
Really?
So it's going to go through security, and that.
Well, and it's not sending a signal out while you're on the plane that causes the plane to crash.
Right.
Which, by the way, Mythbusters way back when busted that myth.
So that's something that keeping it on, and you don't want to have that phone and your phone on at the same time anywhere near each other because your personal phone is sending out that signal.
And we already hit that as a blunder,
little bit.
right? Yeah.
But then
Not
then
at the same time.
having the burner phone on, connecting to the same towers that your personal phone is. Now those two are moving at the same time. Essentially is tied to the same person.
So what would be another burner blunder?
I think communicating, using that burner phone to communicate with other people, their personal phones. So if you're going to use the burner phone, it should be used to communicate with other burner phones.
To keep both sides anonymous.
Correct. Because if you're communicating with the personal phone, that's going to have a call log. They may have a contact identifying you as somebody tied to that number. If the idea is to maintain anonymity, you should probably coordinate ahead of time with that person, Hunter and Devin, right?
Yeah.
So they're keeping both ends of that business communication on the burner.
Other than the communication that got intercepted or got obtained that says, hey, by the way, buddy, go get a burner phone.
Right. So if
I'm going to get one too.
If Hunter was thinking about it, maybe he sets up the email that's private, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe sends it through that email.
Well, all politics aside, I'm not thinking he's the most savvy individual.
Yeah. So it's
He tried.
they're doing what they can, and I think that in the end we only know that because it was on the email, right? And so if there's maybe some other way, clearly that communication could have been had over the phone or in person.
Yeah.
But by preserving it on the email.
You got to remember, anything you write
Yeah.
that goes over the wires,
There's a record of it.
there's anything your computer does leaves a digital trace. Anything your phone does leaves a digital trace. And people can't wrap their head around that, evidently, but that is something that is imperative for people to understand and appreciate. Sometimes that digital trace can literally save your ass. Other times it lights you on fire.
Yeah. So from a privacy standpoint, if you're really going to do business or conduct yourself, to maintain as much anonymity as possible, you have to think through these things. Mm-hmm. Burner phones give you one opportunity to at least have day-to-day communications, but email ends up being a whole different issue. Now, the people that are going to be using burner phones are not going to be using it for email.
Right.
These are older generation phones, just for phone and text. But as soon as you take it to the smartphone level, where you've got access and reaching out to social media and online marketplaces, things like that, you leave a trace of who you are, and it essentially ruins all of that.
And if we're going to give any overarching advice on issues of privacy, it's probably going to be think backwards, right? It's one thing to have it, but then how did you get to it, and how can that trail be followed, right? To you obtaining this, because at some point it'll always come. If you're using a device that is connected to a third-party provider of any type of service, that device can always be found. It can always be traced somehow, some way. Otherwise, you can't. I mean, think about it. Smoke signal is always going to get traced to what? A fire.
Correct.
There's always going to be a source. So what matters to maintaining that privacy is how you get to that source to begin with. Can your access of that source and possession of that source be traced?
And keep in mind, this is an ongoing evaluation. So every time you would use a burner phone, if there would be a mistake made, and that's the beauty of it, throw that phone out.
Yep.
Or if you're using a burner app, you're going to burn that number and get a new one.
Yep.
And so that would eliminate all ties to that phone number. And speaking of like burning the phone, people who are doing this, they would probably burn the number,
literally
smash the phone
and burn it.
And then maybe you dump it in a construction site.
No, that's littering.
Yeah, well,
We're not going to encourage
or
litter.
a dumpster or some other public. You don't want to throw it away at home.
No.
Because
Okay.
they rip your garbage. They find this phone. So you actually have to do something with the phone.
Yeah. So if you're maintaining your privacy is very difficult these days. If you're going to truly attempt to maintain anonymity and privacy, you have to think beyond just that function.
It will be work. It will be an ongoing evaluation.
Yep.
And then if you make a mistake, there's ways to deal with that. But then you have to kind of start over.
That's some quality information.
Yeah.
Appreciate you showing up. This is good. I'm excited for this one, for people to get a hold of this one and yell at us about all kinds of things. But it's going to be great. Appreciate your time.
Anytime.
We're back, fresh off of Burner Blunders and Burner Knowledge Drops, the 3 T's. And I'm told you, Miss Donut, have a doozy of a do's and don'ts with Donut.
I do, and we will see how much the Dope Yoda taught you.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Title, Suspected Money Laundering at My Convenience Store. Hello, I own a higher-end convenience store.
Can I stop real quick? Isn't that a point of a convenience store?
What?
Money laundering, is that part of their function? Sorry, go ahead.
I think so, yes. Hello, I own a higher-end convenience store. We've had normal convenience store in the front, lotto, tobacco, etc. And towards the back of the store, we sell some technology-based products that are sold on my e-commerce store. Anyway, my store has a cryptocurrency ATM inside of it. I do not own it, and it's operated by a third-party company. However, I've seen this teenager, around 15 or 16, come into my store every day for the past 6 months and putting in thousands of dollars a day into the machine and buys Monero with it. In parentheses, it says untraceable cryptocurrency. I've always been suspicious about it because he never completes our KYC, which is required after $2,500. Instead, he buys a new burner phone from either me or someone else and just puts the phone number in to reset his limits. His amounts have to be put in. His amounts that he's put in are increasing dramatically. First, it was around $500, then $1,500, $3,000, and now sometimes I see him putting up to $5,000 a day into a machine. I contacted the owner of the machine. He said he doesn't care as it makes him money, and I get 5% of every transaction. I feel hopeless at this point, and I know something is up with this kid, most likely some sort of illegal activities. Anyone got any advice?
Yes.
I have to read the first comment. It says, "You're free to contact law enforcement and stop selling him burner phones at any time." That guy gets it.
Yeah. I mean, that's my first thing. Dude, you're sitting here. You have a cryptocurrency machine in your convenience store.
Yes.
That you make money off of.
5% every transaction. Actually, he writes 20 to 30% of his business comes from this ATM.
Yeah.
Which is also just fascinating.
Okay. And you sell and make money off of burner phones.
Yes.
Shut up and do that.
Yeah.
You're making money off of illicit activity.
It would have maybe been better to just not write about it on the internet.
If you are so worried about this,
Yes.
take the machine out.
Yep.
Don't sell burner phones.
Yep.
Sell hot dogs,
Yes.
soda pop,
And your
and energy
continue
drinks.
with your e-commerce store without the burner phones.
and lottery tickets.
Yep. And so I did look up this KYC, which is Know Your Customer, which is a requirement of anti-money laundering federal regulations, which is also interesting. And he's in his Reddit post has told us that he watches this 15 to 16-year-old not fill it out every time he deposits several thousands of dollars.
So he's allowing this.
He is allowing
So
it.
he is complicit in violation of federal regulations.
Yep.
Okay.
But no direct contact with the money. That's at least one positive that this convenience store owner is telling us.
Is he taxed on the crypto sales?
That is a great question.
Because I think he should pay taxes on those sales
Yep.
if you're going to complain about them.
I think biggest risk here is if that kid is laundering money and it's occurring in your store, even if you aren't charged with a crime, that ATM is now an instrument that's used in the commission of a crime. And I think the biggest risk is that your ATM gets taken away.
Well, I think there's a bigger risk
Of?
based upon what you say with
Federal
the
regulations?
KYC.
Yeah.
If he's letting these transactions take place without the required paperwork, he's committing a crime.
Yeah.
He's committing a violation of that federal regulation, of that federal law.
Yep.
Probably shouldn't be posting this on Reddit, dummy.
And he posts, there's some identifying information that he provides too about just where his convenience store is.
So awesome.
Why?
So if we're gonna break but first of all, let's look at it from the other angle, because Dope Yoda did teach us a lot of different things. Mm-hmm. Rule number 1 is not to go to the same place over and over and over again to transact your business.
And this is why.
Exactly why. This young man, maybe he's selling the shit out of watermelons or something else, or tomatoes or sweet corn. Might have a hell of a sweet corn stand.
Yep.
But you keep going back to the same place, somebody's going to see something and somebody's going to get suspicious or jealous or whatever it may be.
Or get to the point where they obviously don't want to report you, but they're in a position where they're starting to feel like, okay, what is my liability in this? Now that I see you coming in every day, I know you're not filling this out. Mm-hmm. You're a young kid. Why do you have thousands of dollars every day? And
I'm
why
going
are
with
you
sweet
putting
corn.
it in untraceable crypto? That is a risk that your illegal activities can potentially put other people in risk too.
Yeah, and so 15 or 16-year-old, again, brain's not developed.
Yep.
Not even close. But breaking Dope Yoda's first rule, which is not first, but it was one of the top 3, is don't make repeated transactions at the same location.
Yeah.
Because that orients where they need to go to get the information.
Yep.
Now, if we're looking at, we're going to answer the Reddit post, we're looking at it from the convenience store's perspective.
Yep.
If we broke it down to do's and don'ts, how are you going to summarize these do's and don'ts for the convenience store owner?
After posting this, I think it's probably a good idea to stop selling this kid burner phones and potentially trespass him from your property. That would maybe be a starting point.
So if we're taking the moral high ground,
Yes.
and doing what is socially responsible,
Yep.
we would say do put an end to what's taking place in your store.
Yes.
Okay.
And do talk to an attorney
Yeah.
about how to go forward with potentially making or informing law enforcement, but I would say get an attorney first, since it seems like he might
have broken a few rules himself.
Yeah, have a little bit of culpability in this, at least.
So that's the moral high ground.
Yep.
I would take a different approach.
Let's hear it.
Don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yeah.
If you are setting up your business to sell these items,
Yeah.
to make money off these items,
Yeah.
you make a and lawfully sell these items, I would say do fill out the damn paperwork or require the paperwork to be filled out.
Yeah.
But don't care. You're selling, that's your business. You're saying, I'm allowing untraceable crypto to be sold out of my store.
And I'm making 20 to 30% of my profits are coming from it.
This is how I'm making the rent. If that's how you choose to make a living, don't bite the hand that feeds you.
Yep.
If you don't like how you're making your living, then do find a different way to make a living. But don't be high and mighty on one side, and yet you're facilitating it on the other side.
And also, I think another interesting thing here is that if this is a kid that's coming in and doing this kid did not come up with this plan by himself. So I would also just that money is coming from somewhere.
Yep.
And it seems to be a lot of money, and money's dangerous.
Do care about the kid.
Yeah.
And
your own physical safety too. Like if your business is a instrument of how this potential money laundering is happening, that's what happens when
you struck a moral chord.
Yeah.
There by saying, see, that's why you're the smart one. It's a 15-year-old kid, 16-year-old kid. He's not out there on his own.
Yep.
He's being used by somebody else to make them more money. It's not the frontline soldiers that are making the money.
No.
He's getting lunch money.
And this is also Dope Yoda said, send someone else in. That's probably what this kid is. He's a means to accomplish the end goal of getting it into a crypto or whatever.
So do care about humans and what matters in life, and maybe take steps to do the right thing.
Yeah. Whichever the right thing is for you.
There you go. That's a good do's and don'ts.
I know.
Great
Fits
work.
well.
Yes.
The episode came together well.
You did good work. Last
Cheers.
minute. Maybe that's your best work at last minute.
I know.
No. Always prepare. Well, that's all we got. We'll see you guys next time.
We can't change the past, but we will change your future. GRL Law. Thanks for tuning in to GRL Raw. Check us out at grllaw.com.